Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Tunisia faces its worst crisis in its decade of democracy after President Saied ousts the government and suspends parliament with help from the army. Also, anti-government protesters in Eswatini say that police have kept up a crackdown on demonstrators calling for political reform. Activists say that 2 pro-democracy MPs have been arrested over the weekend. And fish is definitely a favourite dish for many Cameroonians, but most of what they consume comes from abroad. One young entrepreneur that we meet has started a fish farm in the hopes of whetting more appetites with locally grown fare. But first, the country once hailed as the greatest success story of the Arab Spring is facing its worst democratic crisis in a decade. Critics, including those from the biggest political party Ennahda, have accused Tunisia's president of launching a coup after Kais Saied sacked his prime minister and suspended parliament. The army surrounded government buildings on Monday as angry crowds clashed despite public gatherings being banned. The crisis follows a long-running political deadlock between Saied and the prime minister and has been exacerbated by soaring coronavirus infection rates. Fadil Aliriza has more.
Behind us is the parliament, where very early in the morning today, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Speaker of the Parliament, Rashid Ghannouchi, tried to get into the parliament. The military had already taken their posts and denied him entry. Since then, we've seen on both sides people, supporters of Ennahda, who are against the president's decision, as well as supporters of President Kais Saied. Very early in the day, we saw clashes between the two, although at this point it has calmed down considerably, with both sides divided by a police barrier.
I came to defend freedom in the face of this attempted coup. Our parliament is democratically elected by the people as we elect our political parties. So for me, it really is a coup.
We took to the streets because enough is enough. This is too much. All families have a relative who's died of corona. We elect people who can't get us out of the catastrophic health situation, but it's the people who are paying for the pandemic.
I think these decisions are wise and that they will change things in the country. We young people are ready to mobilize to defend what has happened and tell the Ennahda party that they have done enough and that we do not condone them or their supporters.
Different political organizations have worked to put out statements today to try and respond to the president's surprise move yesterday. The main union put out a statement that was surprisingly sympathetic to the president, although calling for it to be within the realm of constitutional laws and constitutional limits. However, parties in parliament today all put out official statements, many in the opposition more sympathetic to the president, and those who are in the ruling coalition against the president. However, there are several people, given the celebrations that are continuing among some in the population, who are not necessarily upset with the freezing of the parliament's work, given its low popularity and low levels of faith in the institution.
Fadil Aliriza there for us. Now, Mali says that a man held for the suspected attempted stabbing of interim leader Colonel Assimi Goïta has died in custody. Goïta was unharmed during last week's attack at Bamako's Great Mosque. Authorities say that the unnamed suspect was detained not long afterwards and his health deteriorated during investigations. He was reportedly later admitted to hospital, where he died before ever facing judicial authorities. The government says that an autopsy has been ordered and that the original investigation will continue. Communities in Ethiopia's Amhara region say that young men have been lining up to respond to a call from regional authorities to take up arms against fighters from neighbouring Tigray. TPLF forces are believed to be advancing deeper into Amhara territory, in the latest phase of a devastating conflict that began between local fighters and federal troops in Tigray last November. Government troops withdrew in June, but Tigrayan forces have pushed on, targeting Amhara soldiers who had fought alongside the federal military. Anti-government protesters in Eswatini say that police have kept up a crackdown on demonstrators calling for political reform. The kingdom is the continent's last absolute monarchy, and dozens were killed during the worst of last month's unrest. On Monday, activists said that 2 pro-democracy MPs had been arrested over the weekend, and that a group of protesters were arrested whilst at a funeral for 2 young people allegedly killed by security forces. Sophie Lamont tells us more.
2 people have died in Eswatini this weekend, where a bloody protest happened in the city of Lomahasa on the border with Mozambique. Reports from the ground show great violence and political repression. This happens in the context where 2 members of parliament have already been arrested for criticizing the king. They're arrested on counts of terrorism. A 3rd one is also on the run because an arrest warrant has been issued against him. The problem here is the system. The people are demanding a more democratic one. They want to elect their own prime minister and not have him be appointed by the king like it is now. The Pudemo, the main opposition party, held a press conference this morning asking for a general boycott of all the businesses where the king has interest, starting on the 6th of August. They're also calling for the international community to step up. The situation has been very violent and repressive. The government says a little under 30 people have died, but the opposition party disputes these figures and says that over 70 people have lost their lives in the last month.
Sophie and Mott there. Now, South Africa's eased some of its coronavirus restrictions at the welcome news that the latest spike in infections has passed its peak. Good news for the country worst affected by the pandemic on the continent. But the worst is still not over for other nations struggling to rein in cases. Algeria and Rwanda have had to ramp up their COVID measures over the weekend. Wasim Kone gives us an overview of the continent's COVID fight back.
Some good news in the battle against coronavirus. This weekend, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa told the nation it would be moving down to an adjusted level 3 of COVID-19 restrictions. The ban on the sale of alcohol on weekdays will be lifted, and residents will be allowed to move freely between provinces once again.
The latest figures suggest that we have largely passed the peak of the 3rd wave of infections. Cabinet this afternoon, after receiving all these recommendations, decided that the country should be moved from adjusted alert level 4 and be placed on adjusted alert level 3.
Further north, Tanzania has received its first batch of 1 million Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The doses were donated by the U.S. government. Tanzania had been among just a handful of African countries yet to receive vaccines, mainly because its former leader John Magufuli had claimed prayer could defeat the pandemic.
I, as a medical personnel, yes, I'm ready to take the vaccination. I think that the government should prepare, let's say, a seminar or something which can instruct the people and tell the people the importance of having the vaccination.
Meanwhile, Algeria has once again tightened restrictions. A curfew is back in about 2/3 of the country's 58 regions, and in those areas, gyms, leisure venues, beaches, and cultural centers will be closed. All gatherings, including weddings, will also be banned. In Ghana, too, infections are on the rise. President Nana Akufo-Addo has slashed the duration of funerals in the country. They will only last for up to 2 hours, and attendance will be restricted to family members only. And finally, in Rwanda, authorities there have extended a stay-at-home order in Kigali and 8 other districts. The current lockdown, which has forced businesses, schools, and transport to close, began 10 days ago.
28 of 121 students taken by gunmen from a school in northwestern Nigeria earlier this month have been released. The captives were abducted from Bethel Baptist High School in Kaduna State whilst asleep in their dorms. In all, 34 kidnapped kids have so far been freed, 5 who managed to escape. Staff at the school say that some releases did come after an undisclosed sum was paid to the kidnapping gang. The region's seen a sharp rise in similar attacks since the end of 2020. And African athletes are already pulling in a medal haul at the Tokyo Olympics, particularly in Taekwondo. Ivory Coast's Ruth Bagby matched the bronze she won in Rio with a great showing in the under 67 kilogram category. Egypt's Hidayah Malak Waba also claimed her second Olympic bronze, whilst Saif Aissa became the 3rd Egyptian to win an Olympic Taekwondo bronze medal with his 3rd place win in the men's under 80 kilogram category. And finally, fish is definitely a favourite dish for many Cameroonians, but half of what is consumed comes from abroad. So one young entrepreneur started a fish farm in the hopes of whetting more local appetites with homegrown fare. Take a look.
Boris Camgo lives in Douala, but he has travelled widely in recent years. He's been to China, Vietnam and the Netherlands to learn how to manage a fish farm.
Ici, nous avons les rouges et les gris. Donc, c'est les mêmes tilapias, juste la couleur qui diffère. C'est des poissons qu'on élève pour la consommation. Donc, tout ce que vous voyez là, on élève et les gens achètent.
Cameroonians consume 500,000 tons of fish a year, but half of it is imported. In this other farm, Boris Kamgo hopes to reduce the country's dependence on foreign countries.
Pendant ma formation, j'ai compris que ça pouvait réussir au Cameroun. Donc, je suis rentré, j'ai fait des recherches dessus pendant 4 ans. J'ai pris l'autorisation au gouvernement et j'ai ramené l'espèce. Et là, j'ai testé, j'ai vraiment les résultats performants. Donc, on peut développer au Cameroun.
He teaches students how to produce fish eggs and one day manage their own fish farm.
C'est ici que nous formons nos étudiants. Donc, ça, c'est un système que j'ai installé avec des matériaux de récupération locaux pour former mes élèves à reproduire les poissons.
According to the government, the number of fish produced in Cameroon has doubled these last 2 years. The Central African nation now makes 10,000 tons a year.
Well, that's it for Eye in Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again. Take care.